Hi, I'm Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary. Welcome to Training Tuesday for March 15th, 2022. I filmed some video in this episode to specifically answer a question from one of my patrons. It had to do with when you know how far to stretch an animal when you're moving to a new approximation. Now, it's pretty easy to know when the animal is ready to move from one approximation or one step to the next. So once the snake, for example, recognizes the target means food and is immediately orienting towards it, you know that it's time to start presenting just the target and then the reinforcement, and then moving the target a little further away and presenting the reinforcement when they make a motion towards it. But how do you know once you start introducing the advanced behavior of following the target long distances, how far to stretch the animal, how far to ask the snake to start traveling when you advance to each step? And I need you to pay close attention to the two longer segments of this video. I intersperse some really short training segments with some early learners. They're just starting to recognize that that target means an opportunity to earn reinforcement, and they're orienting to it really quickly, and it's fun to watch, and they're just a few seconds long. Interspersed a couple of those for fun and to keep this video moving along. The two longer segments are two Morelia bredli. The first one is Boreth, and I ask him to travel a very, very long distance over basically an obstacle course onto one station and then onto a second station, and I will narrate it. And then the second longer segment is also a Morelia bredli named Bennu. What I want you to be focusing on when you watch those two video segments is the snake's whole body, not just the head and neck, because the head and neck can continue moving forward when the middle and lower third of the snake's body have solidly anchored, and they will do that when they've decided that they are not going any further. You're deciding how far do I ask the snake to come when I'm asking them to move and travel longer distances. You need to watch the snake's whole body, and when you see that the middle third and the last third of the body has stopped moving and it's no longer coming forward, even if the head and neck are still moving, it's time to reinforce, because that is the snake's body language telling you they are not comfortable moving forward any further. You might also look for if the snake is heavily anchored onto something, like they've wrapped their tail around something and that tail is not loosening up or not letting go. What you're watching for is that snake's middle to last third of the body, and you'll see that as they're fluidly moving forward, the whole body is moving, and that when they've decided I'm not comfortable going any further, the last half of their body basically stops and it's not moving any longer, and that is a signal that they're not likely to keep moving forward, and that would be the time that you want to reinforce before the animal gets frustrated and either strikes or turns around and retreats because they're not going to go any further. This is Boreth. He is a 4.5-year-old Morelia bredli. He's a pretty advanced learner, and at this point, he's been out exercising for several hours, and I'm calling him down off of this ledge to his station. He's problem solving here, how he's going to get across this space. There's not a ledge or anything really much of to grip onto here. There's about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch ledge at the bottom below that horse head. And the approach and retreat that you see him doing is him thinking about how he is going to get from where he's at over to where I'm asking him to be. So he approaches and retreats a couple of times before he makes the decision that the best course of action is for him to go down lower and place his body on that narrow ledge to help him across. So that is step one. Next, I'm asking him to basically traverse this exercise space. This exercise area is something that he moves around on frequently. In fact, he'd already been out for several hours climbing around these branches in the activity station and in and out of the other room into this room through that opening near the ceiling. So it's not a strange place for him, but he's focusing and concentrating on how to get from the location he's at over to where I'm ultimately asking him to be. What I'm having to do as the handler here is know when to advance the target further. I have to remember to be patient. He's not a dog that's going to come and spring across the room immediately when I call him in just a matter of a few seconds. He is a snake and he is doing the behavior I'm asking him to do. My job is to be patient and allow him to do his job, which is to carefully traverse this obstacle course, basically, that I'm asking him to traverse. I need to allow him the time to make the best decisions for his body so that he is able to get to where I need him to be in a manner that is safe and comfortable for him and that makes sense for him from his perspective. I wait until he is moving forward in a fluid fashion and I can see that he's made that decision as to what route he's going to take to get from point A to point B. And then I change point B. I move the target to another location and I wait for him to traverse this new line from this new location where he's at to the new location I've moved the target to. And this is how we do the whole process. Now I move the target a little bit lower, and now he's got another span of space that he needs to cross. Now what I'm starting to ask him to do is move lower. He's already moved across from basically the other side of the room in an L shape to right above where this station is. And now I'm asking him to come and move down onto the station. And I'm watching his body, not just his head and neck, but I'm also watching the mid part of his body and his tail. This is the time that I have to make a decision as to whether I'm going to ask him to move all the way down onto the station or if I'm going to reinforce before he is completely down there. And I'm very, very carefully watching his body language. And I see, based on the fact that his mid-body and his tail weren't moving that much and that his head was starting to turn to the side and look for reinforcement, that it was time to reinforce him. So what I do, because he isn't all the way down, is I set up a second station. Now I'm going to ask him to move from the first station to the second station. And by doing that, he'll get the rest of his body off of that upper activity area where the branches are. And he'll move it at least down to the middle station, but hopefully all the way onto the second station. So then I can grab it without having to stand on a step stool, without having to get a ladder, and I can carry it back into the room where he lives and he can go into his enclosure. And again, I'm doing this in increments. First, I ask him to orient to the station, and he has a big stall here, and that was my fault. Look at this. That station was not in a good position for him to move down onto. It was basically like me asking you to step onto a balance beam, and as soon as I moved the station in a manner where it was more diagonal to his body posture, he moved down onto it immediately. And that's why antecedent arrangement, the way you have the environment, is so important. That was 100% my fault for not positioning that station in a manner that made this activity easy for him to do. Once I made that adjustment, he did not hesitate to move down onto this station. So now a lot of time has passed, and I've asked him to move quite far. I've asked him to now move on to a second station. I'm watching the middle of his body. I'm watching his tail. And when I see the motion in the middle of his body start to slow and stop, I decide that I'm going to reinforce him for the amount of his body that is on the new station, and I will worry about getting him moved later. Now, he's a very friendly snake. I could have climbed on a ladder and gone up there and gotten him down. He wouldn't have been happy about it because that wouldn't have been his choice. This way, I'm not having to climb up on a ladder to get him down, and it's his choice whether to engage in this interaction or not. So he's choosing to come down. He's choosing to come down onto his station. He just isn't quite prepared to move his tail from station 1 to station 2. And I see all of that movement in the back of his body cease. I see his head start to look around for reinforcement, and that is my cue that I need to go ahead and reinforce him because he's likely to get frustrated if I don't. It's really easy for me to slide his tail off of that bar after he wraps around it and just to wrap it onto the final station. And this way, then I'm able to pick it up and carry it back into his room, and I can position it adjacent to his enclosure so he can put himself away. Bennu is all coiled up there with most of his body on his shelf or ledge, and then the rest of his body coiled tightly on his branch. I'm asking him to shift down off the ledge and branch towards the bottom of his enclosure and out the door. I have a station set up outside of the door. Really watch his body. He's very tense and tightly coiled. He's not as experienced as Boreth is. And he arrived here several years ago for some behavior issues that we've been working through, and target training has just been an indispensable tool in managing his behavior. He's moving really fluently. I know this seems slow, but from his perspective, he is doing exactly the behavior I'm asking him to do. We as handlers need to remember that we move at the learner's pace and we need to be patient. Now, I am staying really focused in on his body and not so much where he's going, because I want you to watch the motion of the middle of his body and his tail. And yes, his head and neck are moving, but you can see that his mid-body and his lower third is fluently and confidently moving forward. And I'm keeping an eye on that. I'm watching his head and neck, I'm watching his face, but I'm really keeping an eye on the middle part of his body, because as soon as that stopped, I knew he wasn't going any further and I needed to reinforce. Thank you so much for watching. And that was actually for Danielle. Danielle Anise has made some of the targets for me that you see in some of the videos, and she is one of my Patreon supporters. She asked that question, and it's really relevant to some work she's doing with her super dwarf reticulated python, and I hope that helped her. And oftentimes when I get questions from clients or patrons, I think those questions are really relevant to a lot of people. And so I wanted to answer this one in this video. If it generated additional questions, please feel free to comment below, or you can reach me at behavioureducationllc@gmail.com, or you can reach me via my website at behavioureducation.org, and also consider becoming a patron. We meet twice a month and have live office hours, chats, and discussions where you can ask me all of your animal training and behavior questions. I also usually go over a research paper, podcast, or article or video, something that we can all watch together and then have a discussion about once a month. And then if you sign up for higher levels, you have the opportunity to have one-on-one training and coaching sessions with me. So please check that out at patreon.com/behavioureducation. Until next time, you can always reach me on social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Everybody, please remember to always be kind and love your animals.